Nothing like ginger. Hallelujah. How do friends influence people? Let's pick up. All right. How do friends influence people? The only book you need to lead you to success. We're going to get into it. It was this desire for a feeling of importance that inspired Dickens to write his immortal novels. This desire inspired Sir Christopher Warren Wren to design his symphonies in stone. This desire made Rockefeller amass millions that he never spent. And this same desire made the richest family in your town build a house far too large for its requirements. This desire makes you want to wear the latest styles, drive the latest cars, and talk about your brilliant children. It is this desire that lures many boys and girls into joining gangs and engaging in criminal activities. The average young criminal, according to E.P. Mulrooney, one time police commissioner of New York, is filled with ego, and his first request after arrest is for those lurid newspapers to make him out a hero. The disagreeable prospect of serving time seems remote so long as he can gloat over his likeness sharing space with pictures of sports figures, movie and TV stars, and politicians. If you tell me how you get your feeling of importance, I'll tell you what you are. That determines your character. This is the most significant thing about you. For example, John D. Rockefeller got his feeling of importance by giving money to erect a modern hospital in Peking, China, to care for millions of poor people whom he had never seen and never would see. Dillinger, on the other hand, got his feeling of importance by being a bandit, a bank robber, and a killer. When the FBI agents were hunting him, he dashed into a farmhouse up in Minnesota and said, "I'm Dillinger." He was proud of the fact that he was public enemy number one. "I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm Dillinger," he said. Yes. The one significant difference between Dillinger and Rockefeller is how they got their feeling of importance. History sparkles with amusing examples of famous people struggling for a feeling of importance. Even George Washington wanted to be called His Mightiness, the President of the United States, and Columbus pleaded for the title, Admiral of the Ocean and Viceroy of India. Catherine the Great refused to open letters that were not addressed to Her Imperial Majesty, and Mrs. Lincoln in the White House turned upon Mrs. Grant like a tigress and shouted, "How dare you be seated in my presence until I invite you?" Our millionaires helped finance Admiral Byrd's expedition to the Antarctic in 1928 with the understanding that ranges of icy mountains would be named after them. And Victor Hugo aspired to have nothing less than the city of Paris renamed in his honor. Even Shakespeare, mightiest of the mighty, tried to add luster to his name by procuring a coat of arms for his family. People sometimes became invalids in order to win sympathy and attention and get a feeling of importance. For example, take Mrs. McKinley. She got a feeling of importance by forcing her husband, the President of the United States, to neglect important affairs of state while he reclined on the bed beside her for hours at a time, his arm about her, soothing her to sleep. She fed her gnawing desire for attention by insisting that he remain with her while she was having her teeth fixed, and once created a stormy scene when he had to leave her alone with the dentist while he kept an appointment with John Hay, his Secretary of State. The writer, Mary Roberts Rinehart, once told me of a bright, vigorous young woman who became an invalid in order to get a feeling of importance. One day, Mrs. Rinehart, the woman, had been obliged to face something her age, perhaps. The lonely years were stretching ahead, and there was little left for her to anticipate. She took her to the bed, and for 10 years her old mother traveled to the third floor and back, carrying trays, nursing her. Then one day the older mother, weary with service, lay down and died. For some weeks the invalid languished. Then she got up, put on her clothing, and resumed living again. Some authorities declare that people may actually go insane in order to find, in the dreamland of insanity, the feeling of importance that has been denied them in the harsh world of reality. There are more patients suffering from mental disease in the United States than from any other diseases combined. What is the cause of insanity? Nobody can answer such a sweeping question, but we know that certain diseases, such as syphilis, break down and destroy the brain cells and result in insanity. In fact, about one half of all mental diseases can be attributed to such physical causes as brain lesions, alcohol, toxins, and injuries. But the other half, and this is the appalling part of the story, the other half of people who go insane apparently have nothing organically wrong with their brain cells. In post-mortem examinations, when their brain tissues are studied under the highest powered microscopes, these tissues are found to be apparently just as healthy as yours and mine. Why do these people go insane? I put that question to the head physician of our most important psychiatric hospitals. This doctor, who has received the highest honors and the most coveted awards for his knowledge of the subject, he told me frankly that he didn't know why people went insane. Nobody knows for sure, but he did say that the many people who go insane find in insanity a feeling of importance that they were unable to achieve in the world of reality. Then he told me this story. I have a patient right now whose marriage proved to be a tragedy. She wanted love, sexual gratification, children, and social prestige, but life blasted all her hopes. Her husband didn't love her. He refused even to eat with her and forced her to serve his meals in his room upstairs. She had no children, no social standing. She went insane, and in her imagination she divorced her husband and resumed her maiden name. She now believes she has married into English aristocracy, and she insists on being called Lady Smith. And as for children, she imagines now that she has had a new child every night. Each time I call on her, she says, "Doctor." Each time I call on her, she says, "Doctor, I had a baby last night." Life once wrecked all her dream ships on the sharp rocks of reality, but in the sunny fantasy isles of insanity, all her barkentines race into port with canvas billowing and wind singing through the masts. Tragic. Oh, I don't know. Her physician said to me, if I could stretch out my hand and restore her sanity, I wouldn't do it. She is much happier as she is. If some people are so hungry for a feeling of importance that they actually go insane to get it. Imagine what miracle you and I can achieve by giving people honest appreciation this side of insanity. One of the first people in American business to be paid a salary of over $1 million a year when there was no income tax and the person earned $50 a week was considered well off was Charles Schwab. He had been picked by Andrew Carnegie to become the first president of the newly formed United States Steel Company in 1921. When Schwab was only 38 years old, Schwab later left U.S. Steel to take over the then troubled Bethlehem Steel Company, and he rebuilt it to one of the most profitable companies in America. Why did Andrew Carnegie pay $1 million a year, or more than $3,000 a day, to Charles Schwab? Why? Because Schwab was a genius? No. Because he knew more about the manufacture of steel than other people. Nonsense. Charles Schwab told me himself that he had many men working for him who knew more about the manufacture of steel than he did. Schwab says that he was paid this salary largely because of his ability to deal with people. I asked I asked him how he did it. Here is his secret set down in his own words. Here is his secret set down in his own words. Words that ought to be cast in eternal bronze and hung in every home and school, every shop and office in the land. Words that children ought to memorize instead of wasting their time memorizing the conjugation of Latin words or the amount of the annual rainfall in Brazil. Words that will all but transform your life and mine if we will only live them. I consider my ability to arouse enthusiasm among my people, said Schwab, the greatest asset I possess, and the way to develop the best that is in a person is by appreciation and encouragement. Wow. There is nothing else that so kills the ambitions of a person as criticisms from superiors. I never criticize anyone. I believe in giving a person incentive to work. So I am anxious to praise but loath to find fault. If I like anything, I am hearty in my approbation and lavish in my praise. This is what Schwab said. But what do average people do? The exact opposite. If they don't like a thing, they bawl out their subordinates. If they do like it, they say nothing. As the old couplet said, once I did bad, and that I heard ever. Once I did bad, and that I heard ever. Twice I did good, but that I heard never. In my wide association in life, meeting with many and great people in various parts of the world, Schwab declared, I have yet to find the person, however great or exalted his nation, who did not do better work and put forth greater effort under a spirit of approval than he would ever do under a spirit of criticism. That, he said, frankly, was one of the outstanding reasons for the phenomenal success of Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie praised his associates publicly as well as privately. Carnegie wanted to praise his assistants even on his tombstone. He wrote an epitaph for himself, which read, here lies one who knew how to get around him, men who were cleverer than himself. Sincere appreciation was one of the secrets of the first John D. Rockefeller's success in handling men. For example, when one of his partners, Edward T. Bedford, lost $1 million for the firm, by a bad buy in South America, John D. Rockefeller might have criticized, but he knew Bedford had done his best, and the incident was closed, so Rockefeller found something to praise. He congratulated Bedford because he had been able to save 60% of the money he had invested. That's splendid, said Rockefeller. We don't always do as well as that upstairs. I have among my clippings a story that I know never happened, that it illustrates the truth. So I'll repeat it. According to this silly story, a farm woman, at the end of a heavy day's work, set before her men folks a heaping pile of hay. Crazy, and when they indignantly demanded whether she had gone crazy, she replied, Why? How do I know you notice? How did I know you notice? I've been cooking for you, man, for the last 20 years, and in all that time, I ain't heard no word to let me know you wasn't just eating hay. When a study was made a few years ago on runaway wives, what do you think was discovered to be the main reason wives ran away? It was lack of appreciation. And I'd bet that a similar study made of runaway husbands would come out the same way. We often take our spouses so much for granted that we never let them know we appreciate them. A member of one of our classes told a request made by his wife. She and a group of other women in her church were involved in a self-improvement program. She asked her husband to help her by listing 6 things he believed she could do to help her become a better wife. He reported to the class, "I was surprised by such a request. Frankly, it would have been easy for me to list 6 things I would like to change about her. My heavens. She could have listed 1,000 things she would like to change about me, but I did. I said to her, let me think about it and give you an answer in the morning. The next morning, I got up very early and called the florist and had them send 6 red roses to my wife with a note saying, I can't think of 6 things I would like to change about you. I love you the way you are. When I arrived at home that evening, who do you think greeted me at the door? That's right, my wife. She was almost in tears. Needless to say, I was extremely glad I had not criticized her as she had requested. The following Sunday at church, after she had reported the result of her assignment, several women with whom she had been studying came up to me and said, that was the most considerate thing I ever heard. It was then I realized the power of appreciation. Florenz Ziegfeld, the most spectacular producer who ever dazzled Broadway, gained his reputation by his subtle ability to glorify the American girl. Time after time, he took drab little creatures that no one ever looked at twice and transformed them on stage into glamorous visions of mystery and seduction. Knowing the value of appreciation and confidence, he made women feel beautiful by the sheer power of his gallantry and consideration. He was practical. He raised the salary of chorus girls from $30 a week to as high as $175. And he was also chivalrous. And on opening night at the Follies, he sent telegrams to the stars and the cast, and he deluged every chorus girl in the show with American Beauty roses. I once succumbed to the fad of fasting and went for 6 days and nights without eating. It wasn't difficult. I was less hungry at the end of the 6th day than I was at the end of the 2nd day. Yet I know, as you know, people who would think they had committed a crime if they let their families or employees go for 6 days without food. But they will let them go for 6 days and 6 weeks and sometimes 60 years without giving them the hearty appreciation that they crave almost as much as they crave food. When Alfred Lunt, one of the great actors of his time, played the leading role in Reunion in Vienna, he said, there is nothing I need so much as nourishment for my self-esteem. We nourish the bodies of our children, friends, and employees, but how seldom do we nourish their self-esteem? We provide them with roast beef and potatoes to build energy, but we neglect to give them kind words of appreciation that would sing in their memories for years, like the music of the morning stars. Paul Harvey, as one of his radio broadcasts, in one of his radio broadcasts, the rest of the story, he told how showing sincere appreciation can change a person's life. He reported that years ago, a teacher in Detroit asked Stevie Morris to help her find a mouse that was lost in the classroom. You see, she appreciated the fact that nature had given Stevie something that no one else in the room had. Nature had given Stevie a remarkable pair of ears to compensate for his blind eyes. But this was really the first time Stevie had been shown appreciation for those talented ears. Now, years later, he says that this act of appreciation was the beginning of a new life. You see, from that time on, he developed his gift of hearing and went on to become, under the stage name of Stevie Wonder, one of the great pop singers and songwriters of the 70s. Some readers are saying right now as they read these lines, "Oh, phooey, flattery, bear oil. I've tried that stuff. It doesn't work. Not with intelligent people." Of course, flattery seldom works with discerning people. It is shallow, selfish, and insincere. It ought to fail, and it usually does. True, some people are so angry, so thirsty for appreciation that they will swallow anything, just as a starving man will eat grass and fishworms. Even Queen Victoria was susceptible to flattery. Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli confessed that he put it on thick in dealing with the Queen. To use his exact words, he said he spread it on with a towel. But Disraeli was one of the most polished, deft, and adroit men who ever ruled the far-flung British Empire. He was a genius in his line. What would work for him wouldn't necessarily work for you and me. In the long run, flattery will do you more harm than good. Flattery is counterfeit, and like counterfeit money, it will eventually get you in trouble if you pass it to someone else. The difference between appreciation and flattery, that is simple. One is sincere and the other insincere. One comes from the heart out. The other comes from the teeth out. One is unselfish, the other is selfish. One is universally admired, the other universally condemned. I recently saw a bust of Mexican hero General Alvaro Obregón in the Chapultepec place in Mexico City. Below the bust are carved these words from General Obregón's philosophy: "Don't be afraid of enemies who attack you. Be afraid of friends who flatter you." No, I'm not suggesting flattery. Far from it. I'm talking about a new way of life. Let me repeat. I'm talking about a new way of life. King George V had a set of 6 maxims displayed on the walls of his study at Buckingham Place. One of these maxims said, "Teach me neither to proffer nor receive cheap praise." That's all flattery is, cheap praise. I once read a definition of flattery that may be worth repeating. Flattery is telling the other person precisely what he thinks about himself. Use what language you will, said Walter Emerson. You can never say anything but what you are. If all we had to do was flatter, everybody would catch on and we should all be experts in human relations. When we are not engaged in thinking about some definite problem, we usually spend about 95% of our time thinking about ourselves. Now, if we stop thinking about ourselves for a while and begin to think of the other person's good points, we won't have to resort to flattery, so cheap and false that it can be spotted almost before it is out of the mouth. One of the most neglected virtues of our daily existence is appreciation. Somehow, we neglect to praise our son or daughter when he or she brings home a good report card, and we fail to encourage our children when they first succeed in baking a cake or building a birdhouse. Nothing pleases children more than this kind of parental interest and approval. The next time you enjoy filet mignon at the club, send word to the chef that it was excellently prepared, and when a tired salesman shows you unusual courtesy, please mention it. Every minister, lecturer, and public speaker knows the discouragement of pouring himself or herself out to an audience and not receiving a single ripple of appreciative comment. What applies to professionals applies doubtably to workers in offices, shops and factories, and families and friends. In our interpersonal relations, we should never forget that all our associates are human beings and hunger for appreciation. It is a legal tender that all souls enjoy. Try leaving a friendly trail of little sparks of gratitude on your daily trips. You will be surprised how they will set small flames of friendship that will be rose beacons on your next visit. Pamela Donham of New Fairfield, Connecticut, had among her responsibilities on her job the supervision of a janitor. I'm going to reread that. Pamela Dunham of New Fairfield, Connecticut, had among her responsibilities on her job the supervision of a janitor who was doing a poor job. The other employees would jeer at him and litter the hallways to show him what a bad job he was doing. It was so bad, productive time was being lost in the shop. Without success, Pam tried various ways to motivate this person. She noticed that occasionally he did a particularly good piece of work. She made a point to praise him for it and in front of the other people. Each day the job he did all around got better, and pretty soon he started doing all his work efficiently. Now he does an excellent job, and other people give him appreciation and recognition. Honest appreciation got results where criticism and ridicule had failed. Hurting people not only does not change them, it is never called for. There is an old saying that I have cut out and pasted on my mirror where I cannot help but see it every day. I shall pass this way but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. Emerson said, "Every man I meet is my superior in some way, in that I learn of him." If that was true of Emerson, it is likely to be 1,000 times more true of you and me. Let's cease thinking of our accomplishments, our wants. Let's try to figure out the other person's good points, then forget flattery. Give honest, sincere appreciation, but hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. And people will cherish your words and treasure them and repeat them over a lifetime. Repeat them years after you have forgotten them. Give honest and sincere appreciation. Principle number 2. So principle number 1 was never criticize, condemn, or complain. Principle number 2, give honest and sincere appreciation. I'm going to set a quick 15-minute timer. 14 minutes, actually. Give myself a minute to prepare. Let's do it. Chapter 3. Page 30 to 46. Let's do it. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. I often went fishing up in Maine during the summer. Personally, I am very fond of strawberries and cream, but I have found that for some strange reason, fish prefer worms. So when I went fishing, I didn't think about what I wanted. I thought about what they wanted. I didn't bait the hook with strawberries and cream. Rather, I dangled a worm or a grasshopper in front of the fish and said, "Wouldn't you like to have that?" Why not use the same common sense when fishing for people? This is what Lloyd George, Great Britain's Prime Minister during World War I, did. When someone asked him how he managed to stay in power after the wartime leaders, Wilson, Orlando, and Clemenceau, he had been forgotten. He replied that if his staying on top might be attributed to any one thing, it would be to his having learned that it was necessary to bait the hook to suit the fish. Why talk about what we want? That is childish, absurd. Of course, you are interested in what you want. You are eternally interested in it. But no one else is. The rest of us, just like you, we are interested in what we want. So the only way on earth to influence other people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. Remember that tomorrow, when you are trying to get somebody to do something, if, for example, you don't want your children to smoke, don't preach at them. Don't talk about what you want, but show them that cigarettes may keep them from making the basketball team or winning the 100-yard dash. This is a good thing to remember regardless of whether you are dealing with children or calves and chimpanzees. For example, one day Ralph Waldo Emerson and his son tried to get a calf into the barn, but they made the common mistakes of thinking of only what they wanted. Emerson pushed and his son pulled, but the calf was not doing what they were doing. He was thinking only of what he wanted. So he stiffened his legs and stubbornly refused to leave the pasture. The Irish housemaid saw their predicament. She couldn't write essays and books, but on this occasion at least, she had more horse sense or calf sense than Emerson had. She thought of what the calf wanted, so she put her maternal finger in the calf's mouth, with the calf stuck at her finger as she gently led him into the barn. Every act you have ever performed since the day you were born was performed because you wanted something. How about the time you gave a large contribution to the Red Cross? Yes, that is no exception to the rule. You gave the Red Cross the donation because you wanted to lend a helping hand. You wanted to do a beautiful, unselfish, divine act. Inasmuch as ye have done, it is unto one of the least of these, my brethren, yet ye have done it unto me. If you hadn't wanted that feeling more than you wanted your money, you would not have made the contribution. Of course, you might have made the contribution because you were ashamed to refuse or because the customer asked you to do it. But one thing is certain, you made the contribution because you wanted something. Harry A. Overstreet is in his illuminating book, Influencing Human Behavior, said, "Action springs out of what we fundamentally desire." And the best piece of advice which can be given to would-be persuaders, whether in business, in the home, in the school, in politics, is first arousing the other person an eager want. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. Andrew Carnegie, the poverty-stricken Scotch, who started to work at 2 cents an hour and finally gave away $365 million, learned early in life that the only way to influence people is to talk in terms of what the other person wants. He attended school only 4 years, yet he learned He attended school only for 4 years, yet he learned how to handle people. To illustrate, his sister-in-law was worried sick over her 2 boys. They were at Yale, and they were so busy with their own affairs that they neglected to write home and paid no attention, whatever their mother's frantic letters. Pay no attention whatever to their mother's frantic letters. Then Carnegie offered a wager $100 that he could get an answer by return mail. Without even asking for it, someone called his bet. So he wrote his nephews a chatty letter, mentioning casually in a postscript that he was sending each one a $5 bill. He neglected, however, to enclose the money. Back came replies by return mail thanking dear Uncle Andrew for his kind note, and you can finish the sentence yourself. Another example of persuading comes from Stan Novak of Cleveland, Ohio, a participant in our course. Stan came home from work one evening to find his youngest son, Tim, kicking and screaming on the living room floor. He was to start kindergarten the next day and was protesting that he would not go. Stan's normal reaction would have been to banish the child to his room and tell him he'd just better make up his mind to go. He had no choice. But tonight, recognizing that this would not really help Tim start kindergarten in the best frame of mind, Stan sat down and thought, if I were Tim, what would I be excited about going? What would I be excited about going to kindergarten? If I were Tim, why would I be excited about going to kindergarten? He and his wife made a list of all the fun things Tim would do, such as finger painting, singing songs, making new friends. Then they put them into action. We all started finger painting on the kitchen table, my wife, Lil, my other son, Bob, and myself, all having fun. Soon, Tim was peeping around the corner. Next, he was begging to participate. Oh no, you have to go to kindergarten first to learn how to finger paint. With all the enthusiasm I could muster, I went through the list, talking in terms he could understand, telling him all the fun he would have in kindergarten. The next morning, I thought I was the first one up. I went downstairs and found Tim sitting asleep in the living room chair. Oh my goodness, what are you doing here? I asked. Tim asked, I'm waiting to go to kindergarten. I don't want to be late. The enthusiasm of our entire family had aroused in Tim an eager want that no amount of discussion or threat could have possibly accomplished. Tomorrow you may want to persuade someone to do something. Before you speak, pause and ask yourself, how can I make this person want to do it? That question will stop us from rushing into a situation heedlessly with futile chatter from our desires. At one time, I rented the grand ballroom of a certain New York hotel for 20 nights in each season in order to hold a series of lectures. At the beginning of one season, I was suddenly informed that I should have to pay almost 3 times as much as rent as formerly. This news reached me after the tickets had been printed and distributed and all announcements had been made. Naturally, I didn't want to pay the increase, but what was the use of talking to the hotel about what I wanted? They were interested only in what they wanted. So a couple of days later, I went to see this manager. I was a bit shocked when I got your letter, I said, but I don't blame you at all. If I had been in your position, I should have written a similar letter myself. Your duty as the manager of the hotel is to make all the profit possible. If you don't do that, you will be fired, and you ought to be fired. Now, let's take a piece of paper and write down the advantages and disadvantages that will accrue to you if you insist on this increase in rent. Then I took a letterhead and ran a line through the center. Headed one column, 5 minutes left. Headed one column advantages and the other column disadvantages. I wrote down under the head advantages these words, ballroom free. Then I went on to say, you will have the advantage of having the ballroom free to rent for dances and conventions. That is a big advantage. For affairs like that will pay you so much more than you get for a series of lectures. If I tie your balloon room up for 20 nights during the course of the season, it is sure to mean a loss of some profitable business to you. Now let's consider the disadvantages. First, instead of increasing your income from me, you're going to decrease it. In fact, you are going to wipe it out because I cannot pay the rent you are asking. I shall be forced to hold these lectures at some other place. There's another disadvantage to you also. These lecturers attract crowds of educated and cultured people to your hotel. That is good advertising for you, isn't it? In fact, if you spent $5,000 advertising in the newspapers, you couldn't bring as many people to look at your hotel as I could bring by these lecturers. That is worth a lot to a hotel, isn't it? As I talked, I wrote these two disadvantages under the proper heading and handed the sheet of paper to the manager, saying, I wish you would carefully consider both of the advantages and disadvantages that are going to accrue to you, and then give me your final decision. I received a letter the next day informing me that my rent would be increased only by 50% instead of 300. Mind you, I got this reduction without saying a word about what I wanted. I talked all the time about what the other person wanted and how he could get it. Suppose I had done the human natural thing. Suppose I had stormed into his office and said, what do you mean by raising my rent 300%? When you know the tickets have been printed and announcements made. 300%? Ridiculous. Absurd. I won't pay. What would have happened then? An argument would have begun to steam and boil and sputter. And you know how arguments end. Even if I had convinced him that he was wrong, his pride would have made it difficult for him to back down and give in. Here's one of the best bits of advice ever given about the fine art of human relationships. If there's any one secret of success, said Henry Ford, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from the other person's angle as well as your own. Amen. Thank you very much. If you like tea, tap the link in bio. God is good.